MTN is Africa's biggest cellular network operator, operating in 21 countries across the region, including big businesses in South Africa, Nigeria and Ghana. It has of over 170 million customers. MTN has a market cap of 270 billion rand and a price to earnings ratio of 13 and a dividend yield of 5%. MTN has been in the news for quite some time now, given that whole bribery scandal with Turkcell. So your thoughts on how the stock is going to perform under this cloud, Paul?
Yeah, it has been an interesting year. Look, it's been a very successful stock. We've owned it in our asset management business since it traded at 12 Rand a share. Back in the day, it was the second most significant South African cell phone company. The reason being that they launched a couple of months later and Vodacom got a better market share. Their shareholder base evolved over time, and they've come through a number of different CEOs. Very interesting move to go into Nigeria. A lot of people said it was crazy of them to go and spend $250 million on an MTN voice license in Nigeria. People said, what kind of a country is that? Well, they proved everybody wrong. So it's done particularly well. It was then in a strong acquisitive phase. So what you see today with MTN is the aggregation of their own initiatives. They bought a business that had Lebanese roots, but had a variety of different licenses that added Ghana, that added a number of countries in the Middle East. Then they got the Iranian license, which is what you're referring to. For a while, it looked as though they were going to do a deal with an Indian company. So that caused a bit of a flutter a couple of years ago. But where they are today, they've evolved into a big giant. They've got a substantial dividend distribution. I think this whole Iranian thing is really a bit of a storm in a teacup.
What do you think of this whole Iranian thing with regards to MTN?
Look, I think in general, if you are the market leader, you dominate in a certain market, you're going to be subject to those things coming up against you all the way. I think the rule of thumb is that if you've got the ability to pay, then someone is going to come knocking.
Now, looking at MTN in Nigeria, we did have them being fined for poor service. Your thoughts of the operation within Nigeria?
So what you're seeing in Nigeria right now is that it's still a growing market. We had problems last year, logistics and everything political-wise. So operators, they couldn't move equipment from wherever it comes from, Europe or wherever, China, into the country. So you saw that most of them, in terms of their investment plans, they were sort of short of those. Maybe they were 70% through the investment plan for the year. They couldn't get to deliver in terms of the network investments that they'd sort of guided to. But however, most of them, they've raised their capital sort of expenditure plans this year quite significantly, and things are getting better. So it's a market that is growing very strongly. You have got power issues, you've got many other problems in there. It's not only the telecoms operators themselves who are not investing enough.
Let's look at the MTN graph, Paul, currently at around 157 about?
Yeah, about less, 145 or so. I mean, but this has been a rather roller coaster period. This is that spike I referred to when they were talking to Bharti and a couple of other Indian companies, Reliance, and there was talk that maybe there'd be some sort of share swap. And then that's the collapse of 2009, when everything was trading at a low price, but it held up reasonably well since there. But this is the period where it's been a bit drifty, nothing much terribly happening. But I think MTN is a great company. I'm a little bit conflicted with that because I've been saying that for a decade, but they have succeeded in places like Nigeria where plenty of others have failed. People like to say, oh well, every now and then the call quality is not what it needs to be. But remember, people like Telkom, Vodacom even, have written off vast sums in these countries. Bharti, the big Indian giant that said that they would transform the Nigerian market, well, I don't see it so far. MTN remains, 55–60% shareholder. It's got great EBITDA margins up there. So I think it's a company that really executes well. It's got good technical staff around the world and has done a great job in terms of rolling out the service.
Peter, like Paul is saying, MTN is trading in a bit of a range at this stage. Would you say that investors are taking a bit of a wait-and-see approach, given what is happening with the whole bribery scandal?
That's what it looks like at this stage, because if I look at MTN, to me, it's going to be a bumpy road. It's not going to be a smooth one. But net, if you look over the midterm, it does look like you've got a very good blend of a company that is still growing, very good diversified exposure, and at the same time cash returns are quite nice and very good in this company. So I think, yeah, the answer to your question, I'll put yes. If you look from a multiples point of view, AP sort of side of things, it has derated somehow relative to its emerging market peers, which suggests that investors are saying, let's see what's going to happen out of this.
I just want to address this issue head on, because you've been looking for a comment on the Iranian situation.
Indeed.
Look, I mean, they had a guy there who was on the ground, a person called Chris Kilowan, who, you know, basically leaked his entire documents folder to Turkcell for money in order to embarrass MTN to the largest possible extent. I think that court case is going to get thrown out. So the US courts are not interested in hearing cases about African companies that operate in Iran. You know, they must take those things somewhere else. The bigger issue of whether or not the Iranian business comes to be worth something in MTN's life or not depends on what happens with the country Iran. You know, they're in the face of some heavy sanctions now. Oil exports from Iran have been curbed. I think Iran is in a lot of trouble economically, and I think that's going to either result in some kind of change in Iran, or if it doesn't, Iran's going to get substantially worse. So I think it is a real concern to MTN what happens in Iran, but I think the court case is a bit of a nonsense. Even the issue of having paid the South African ambassador, Jojo Salaji, a big bribe to buy a house in Fairy Glen in Pretoria.
He's been suspended?
He's been suspended, but it turns out Kilowan gave him the money and said he thought he would get it back from MTN. So I don't know, I think Kilowan is a little bit out there, and I think he's got his own agenda. But the bigger issue is, more importantly, Iran, not Chris Kilowan and the Turkcell nonsense.
All right. Big issue, Iran. Hot or not on MTN?
Look, I mean, for me, that's been an overhang, but I do love the stock, and I do think that the market has firmed in recent weeks, which is telling you that maybe this thing is starting to, you know, blow over. So that's a hot.
And yourself, Peter? Hot or not on MTN?
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be a bumpy road, but I think I'll put it very hot. Yes. If I look at the business model.
All right, great. Bumpy road ahead for MTN, but it is hot all round.